Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Bo Martonic.
All right, guys, this is the last episode of the Colorado Elk Hunt Series of daily podcasts. I hope everyone's enjoyed them up to this point, and I've been really excited with how this project has turned out, and I'm looking for as much feedback as I can possibly get on it. What you liked, what you didn't like, what I can improve on, anything along those lines. So this will be a recap of days 12 and 13, which is 13 is when we packed out, so there's not a whole lot going on there. But the reason why I'm recording this now, so actually I'm recording this on October 2nd, and I did not record it on the last night of the hunt, and the reason for that being is I got really sick and couldn't really talk at all. So that's kind of the reason behind it, and I kind of wanted to change gears a little bit with how I did this last episode. I wanted to, cover the last couple days of hunting and what happened there. I would like to have the other guys on it that were there with me experiencing it in case they had anything that I would miss. But without being able to do that, I decided to also encapsulate a gear rundown on this podcast. So after I go over what happened on those last few days there of the hunt, I'm going to talk about the gear I used. I'm not going to go through every single piece, but a lot of things that I was using, what worked, what didn't work, and, what I can improve on, I guess, going forward. And just note, though, that these things that I'm talking about, I'm not saying that everything that I would use is the best or the worst or anything along those lines. It all comes down to whatever worked for me, and I did not test all the different companies, all the different products out there, but what I used, why it worked or why it didn't work. So that's going to be kind of the basis of it, and wanted to kind of give that little bit of a disclaimer there before I started. So hopefully you can't hear the loud thunderstorm here in the back. We just got through a tornado warning here in central Pennsylvania, so it's a little bit loud with rain and everything, but the back porch seemed like the best place to come out here and work and just kind of relax after the day. So anyways, get started here. So on day 12 of the hunt, woke up in the morning and I was there with Joey, Gabe, and Logan, and we took off about an hour and a half before first light, actually, in the morning. Left camp just before 5 a.m. and took off up the trail. So we were heading in the direction of where we were on day 11, where we had all those crazy encounters with the bulls, and it was kind of like a bugle fest there for the first time in the trip. So we headed back in there with some high hopes. Since we didn't spook any of those bulls, we're figuring we could get back into them again. So we were actually a little bit ahead of schedule from where we were the day before. Got back in, got to the Aspen Grove where we ran into that giant 6-point herd bull the morning before, and just kind of sat there and listened for a while. And to our surprise, didn't actually hear any of the bugles that we were hearing from that, bugle fest the day before. We were figuring things were just, firing up in there. But at least right where we were there, that wasn't the case. We did hear a few bugles down the creek a little bit further, but it was very difficult to pinpoint where they were coming from. So we decided to, as the thermals were still coming off the mountain, we worked our way up along the Aspen dark timber edge and went up to the really high up dark timber and got up there below some cliffs and started getting into a lot of elk sign. And there was trails, and it just kind of smelled like elk. So we're decided to kind of camp out for a little bit, listen from a high point, glassy opposing hillside, and do a little bit of calling. So we all kind of set up in some different areas with what we were hoping the wind was, in our favor. But at that point, the thermals hadn't completely switched yet, so anything coming below us was ultimately going to wind us. But from figuring out that, we just came up from that direction, didn't really expect anything to come from there. So as we were sitting there kind of by the trees, Gabe and Logan had pointed out on one of the aspens, or a couple of the aspens actually, some carvings in there. And they had seen this in the past in this area because of hunting there for so many years. But there was a name carved in the tree with the date July 6th, I think, 1948, which is just absolutely crazy to see that being that old of a carving being an aspen tree that's still there, legible, and everything else. So that was really cool. But anyways, so we sat there for a little bit. Gabe and I were kind of bugling back and forth and got a bull to answer us, but he was, again, really tough to tell where he was at, but he was definitely in the bottom somewhere, and we knew we couldn't really approach him with the wind the way it was, so we just kind of sat still and shut up for a while. Well, all of a sudden we started hearing an elk, and or what sounded like an elk at least, and he was coming from the side of us kind of below, and we're getting kind of sketched out, not sure what was going to happen there because he was heading towards our wind. And what do you know, the elk hit our wind and blew out. Could not tell what it was because of the dark timber that was below us, but we could only assume that it was the bull that was calling back to us down the bottom. So that was kind of upsetting that bull came up and winded us there. So of course, when we didn't really want to call him in there is when that worked out. So that was the last we heard any bugles from that bull. So we kind of just chilled out there for a little bit and took the afternoon off, as far as we just wanted to wait and head back into the bottom as it got closer to the evening. And reason for that is we knew there was bulls down in there, and they were coming to this one part of the water source where the mountains, where there was kind of like a saddle that ran down over the hill, and some aspen groves ran to this creek bottom. So we're going to go head back down there in the evening and not risk blowing anything out. So this was kind of something different than I'm used to doing, where in the middle of the day, I typically am running through the dark timber and being kind of aggressive. But in this case, we weren't going to do that. And those guys, talked, were kind of, making sense to me of it, because, I wanted to move, and I think Logan did a little bit too, but Gabe and Joey were kind of giving us really good reasons on why maybe we should be patient. We were patient the last few days, and it worked out in having encounters. So that's what we did. We were patient with it, and I don't think we could have made a better decision from that standpoint. But we went down there, got down towards the bottom, glassy opposing hillside, and we did see a spike bull and a cow up on a rock cliff just looking down on the bottom. But it looked like they were just kind of looking down before they were going to head down for the evening for food and water. But we never ended up seeing them. So we sat there till dark. And as I had said in the previous podcast, I was getting pretty sick. And I really started feeling like shit about that point. When it was getting evening, the temperatures were dropping. It went from about 85 in the day down into, the 40s at this point, right before dark. And I was standing right down in the creek bottom, so it's even, colder coming with the draft coming down the creek. And I just got to the point where I felt like my body was just going to shut down. My throat was swollen, and it hurt to swallow, it hurt to breathe, and I just wanted to lay down and sleep. And it's funny how, something that's, I guess, essentially a bad cold is so much, it's so much more uncomfortable when you're in the backcountry, when you don't have the comforts of being able to go lay in your bed or go in a warm house or get some soup or do anything like that. It's so different. Anyways, once it did get dark, We headed back out of there. We're walking back, and I was just struggling. I was having trouble breathing because I was congested up top, but I couldn't breathe real good out of my mouth. And I was really struggling and almost felt like my body hit a bonking point. So it just, everything shut down. My muscles shut down. My body shut down. Just felt extremely sick and actually broke out into a fever. And at that point, I was like, this really isn't good. I don't know what the hell we're gonna do to get back there. And the guys were really helpful. Hey, you want to wait up? What do you need? Anything there? And I think Logan gave me some ibuprofen because I had used all mine that had my first aid kit. That's one thing I'd say before I go any further. I pulled out cold medicine and extra ibuprofen out of my first aid kit to save room and weight before the trip, and I wouldn't do that again. So I only brought, for the whole 14 days, 6 ibuprofen, and I needed them right then. so I had used up all that, and that was kind of a struggle. So anyways, we just one foot in front of the other, got back to camp. It was about a little over a 3-mile hike back, and I just felt absolutely like trash. But heated up, I had a sockeye salmon chowder, or smoked sockeye salmon chowder from Heather's Choice, and man, did that hit the spot. In the evening, that meal is just my favorite that she makes, and I know it is for a lot of people. It's so good. But that was almost like your hot soup that you needed. And then also when I got back, Logan had I can't remember what he had, some sort of cold medicine there. Again, luckily he was prepared for it and was able to give me that, and just ate that sockeye salmon chowder and was getting ready for bed. But one of Logan's family friends showed up, who's basically an old cowboy that lives in Colorado there. His father used to guide Logan's grandfather back in the, I believe, the 60s or 70s, and this guy's grown up in the area his whole life and everything there. So he came back and on his horse and was just telling stories and everything else. So it was tough to go to bed when you're that sick, but hearing those kind of stories is what I live to do at a hunting camp. Sitting around a fire, listening to these old stories about what it was like hunting in this area 40, 50 years ago is absolutely crazy. And was one of the most enjoyable parts of the trip, to be able to hear those stories. So I went to bed that night. Next day was the day to pack out. So we were planning on hunting in the morning and then, packing out in the evening. I woke up and it was at the point where I didn't think I could take another step from a hunting standpoint, and I was just going to hold those guys back. I was like, hey, I said, I don't know if I'm going to be able to go out this morning. I'll get camp packed up here. When you guys get back, we'll be good and we'll go. And those guys were kind of ready at that point too, and decided that they were just going to head back, and we were all going to go back in the morning. So made a good breakfast, got up, cleaned up everything, got the horses all saddled up, and hiked out. So we had the long hike out in the late morning as it started getting really hot, and felt like I was getting a little bit delirious. I was still sick and tired and everything else. But got back out to camp there, or back out to the truck, and it was a good feeling, but at the same time, I was kind of disappointed and felt really down on myself and everything else with not being able to fill a tag, or anybody in the group fill a tag. And it took until I was driving home for that really to settle in. Like, as far as the whole time I was doing it, I kept telling myself, it's just live in the moment. Don't focus so much on the end goal that you're not enjoying the experience. And I think I did a decent job at that, and I was able to kind of reel my thoughts into where they needed to be. But at the end of the hunt like that, there's always some disappointment, and if there's not, then then you might as well just go out for a hike instead of a hunt. But and or at least that's the way I am. Not everyone, but it was when I rode back with Logan to town, and he was kind of talking to me. He was kind of the same boat, a little bit disappointed and felt defeated at some point. But we both came to the realization that that's hunting. That's the way that it is. And we had the trip of a freaking lifetime. And you can't pull that away. I spent, essentially 14 days in the mountains, in the backcountry, not at work, nothing on my mind besides hunting, attempting to kill an elk, and surviving, basically. So that was crazy to think of it that way and realize how lucky that I was, and then also how lucky the group was to be able to do that. So once you kind of let that settle in, it made it a little bit easier. I'm not saying it made it easier. It made it a little bit easier. But we got back into town, ate the biggest, greasiest pizza I could find, buffalo chicken with ranch and garlic fries. So anyone that knows me and everything, I eat pretty clean most of the time. I'd say almost all the time when I'm, at my house or anything along those lines. But when I'm after that, all I wanted was pizza. That's like my food of choice, is pizza and an ice cold beer. So had that. All of us, crushed that food. We went back to Billy, who was the cowboy's house there, and got a shower and ended up hitting the road at that point. So those guys took off a different direction. They dropped the horses off at Billy's pasture there, because for when their family was going to come back out in rifle season, and they were taking the empty trailer. And I told them to just kind of go their way. They were going to head up Interstate 80, and I was going to take 70 back to Pennsylvania. Just decided to go by myself, and not for any other reason other than I just had the time. I figured when I wasn't feeling well, again, it sounds kind of dumb the way as I'm talking about it now, when it probably would have been a big help to be with other people, but I just kind of wanted just to sit there and collect my thoughts as I was driving back. So started driving right then. So again, woke up, say 7, 8 in the morning or so at the latest, packed up camp, hiked out, and by the time we ate, showered and everything, it's 5, 6 o'clock in the evening, and I'm heading out for a 27-hour drive back to Pennsylvania. It definitely, I wouldn't say it was one of the smarter things that I've done, but the one thing I had going on my side was I had leftover stromboli from the pizza place that Gabe left in my truck. Thank you for that, buddy. It was extremely good at 2 in the morning. And had a bunch of packets of Mountain Ops Ignite to get me through. I actually didn't drink any coffee the whole way back. So just drove and made it to somewhere in Missouri as it was getting first light, and I needed to take a little nap. So I fell asleep in the passenger seat of my truck, woke up to extremely hot interior because I didn't crack the windows. And so I got a little over an hour of sleep, maybe hour and a half at most. Got back in the truck and drove the rest of the way. So left Friday evening, got back to Pennsylvania Sunday morning about 1 a.m. Along the way, I stopped at just about every greasy fast food place you could think of and plowed food. Ate a 12-inch Subway sub with a bag of chips. I think I had a Coca-Cola or a Pepsi with it, and I do not drink any pop at all. So that was just something that was a comfort item as I was going back for some reason. And as you can guess, my blood sugar wasn't extremely steady. And made it all the way back, and that was kind of it. Drove all the way through with just sleeping that little bit, and I crashed hard once I got home. But it was quite the amazing trip, I would say. So that's kind of the recap there of day 12 and 13. And I wanted to go dig into this a little bit further and talk about some of the gear that I had used on the trip and kind of how that worked out for me. So the biggest thing that I talk about a lot, and reason being is as going through a lot of extensive training on the topic and testing myself, would be the clothing system. So as many of you know, I'm a big proponent of performance apparel, and I use Sitka Gear myself, and there's a lot of other great brands out there. First like Kuyu and the rest of them there that make them, but Sitka is what works for me, and I really love how fine-tuned you can build your system with Sitka Gear. And so I'm going to kind of go through my system here for you. I wore about kind of 2 different systems throughout the trip, but all it was switching out a different base layer. The main one that I wore was the Core lightweight t-shirt as a base layer, and the Merino Core lightweight bottoms. So when I say the bottoms, are basically underwear that are merino. And then on top of that ran either the Core lightweight hoodie, and this is where I kind of had a fluctuation there. So the Core lightweight hoodie is a base layer, but I wore it over top of the Core lightweight t-shirt a lot of times for hunting during the day, or I wore the Apex hoodie in place of the Core lightweight, which is a little bit heavier. It's a merino synthetic blend, and that piece was new for 2018, the first time I got to use it. Super cool piece. So for, I'd say 95% of the elk hunt, I was wearing the Core lightweight t-shirt and either the Core lightweight hoodie or Apex hoodie, and then for the bottoms, the Apex pant. First time I ever tried them out, I've been a strong proponent of Sitka's mountain pants for the last 3 years now, and decided to try out the Apex system after talking to John Barklow, Sitka's big game product manager. If you haven't listened to that podcast, it's a few back now, about building systems and not specific to any brand. But anyways, so Sitka Apex pant, I wore them for the whole entire trip. Never stunk. It's a merino blend, again with synthetic. It's kind of if you're looking at Sitka's line, it's a mix between their Ascent pant, which is their extremely lightweight pant, and the mountain pant. So it kind of falls in between as far as weight goes. But those pants, I had the knee pads installed in them. I love running knee pads for just kneeling down when you're cooking food or putting on a stock or even setting up and you're kneeling down on one knee. I really like wearing those knee pads. So that system right there is what I was gunning with 95% of the time. But in my pack, I also included the Kelvin Active jacket. So that's a piece that's an active insulation piece, meaning it provides warmth, almost like a lightweight puffy, but it also breathes extremely well. You can hike in it, and you're not feeling like you're turning into a wet sweat ball underneath it. So how I kind of ran that was with, when I would run that Core lightweight hoodie, I'd go right into that Kelvin Active over top of it. And that there wasn't really a time during that hunt when I needed anything more than that system right there. I also had the Sitka Dew Point rain jacket in my pack, which got really lucky on this trip and didn't experience a lot of bad weather like we have in the past. It hailed a few times, but never snowed, never got any really bad thunderstorms. It was mild weather, so I didn't use that a whole lot. But that was kind of my Sitka system in a roundabout. And also got to try out the Flash hoodie a little bit. And that's a really cool wind stopper piece with tape seams to make it highly water resistant. But to kind of keep it simple here for everyone, the system that worked for me that I wore most of the time, always start with base layers. And the merino lightweight boxers are legit. Don't buy performance hunting pant if you're not going to have performance base layers as far as in underwear boxer form. So that, the Apex pant, core lightweight hoodie, core lightweight t-shirt, and also the Apex hoodie were the biggest things for me. So without spending any more time there, I guess it's still a little bit part of your clothing system. I'm going to look at socks. So I ran Darn Tough socks and Lowa boots. So I wore the Lowa Tibet Gore-Tex boots. And I've been running them for 3 years now, and I can't even begin to count the number of miles I've had on them. On this trip specifically, went over 120 miles hiking, and did that with 3 pairs of socks over the 14 days. I did wash them halfway through the trip, but 2 to 3 pairs of sock is all I need for 7 days, and those Darn Toughs are just legit. They don't stretch out, they don't stink with them being merino, and they're darn tough from the name, as cliche as it sounds. They have a lifetime warranty with them. They are 100% worth the $20 a pair they are. You can buy a couple pair of them, and it'll last you literally a lifetime with it, with their warranty. So those socks are awesome. So I ran them with the Lowas and didn't have any issues with blisters or hot spots or anything else. I think there was actually one day I was starting to get a blister on my big toe, and I just put some tape around it for a day, and it was fine. Didn't get any worse. But that setup was really cool. So when it comes to boots, I'm not going to sit there and say, oh, the Lowas are the best boot out there, because it all depends on the way your foot is shaped and how it feels. So someone may say it's the worst boot ever. It gave them, hot spots. It hurt their feet, everything else, and it could, depending on your foot design. But for me, I've really liked that stiffer kind of trekking style boot in the Lowa Tibet. I'm going to be, without going too much down a rabbit hole here, I'm going to be trying out some Crispies here in the whitetail season with a little bit of insulation, so 400 grams of Primaloft insulation in them. Not enough to make your feet sweat when you're hiking in a ways, but warm enough to keep you, toasty in the stand. So, but I'll save that for a different podcast. So in addition to that, talk about packs a little bit. So this is something that I kind of went back and forth on here. So a lot of people were asking me, I've wore a Kifaru last year, and I used it all whitetail season, and was planning on using it this trip. Love Kifaru packs. What Aaron's doing with his team there is just, and they've been doing even before Aaron, has been an absolute great job. If it were up to me, I would never buy another pack after running that Kifaru. But it's in my kind of mind to want to try out different things, and Sitka Gear came out with a new Mountain Hauler 6200 this year, so I kind of wanted to try that out as well. So I split my time on the trip between the two packs. So for the first part of the trip, I ran the Mountain Hauler, and again, what really interested me is Barklow was behind the design of this with the rest of the team at Sitka Gear, but they've been working on it for quite a few years now, and I know when John comes out with a product through Sitka that he's not going to release it unless he's extremely happy with it. And some of Sitka's packs in the past were great packs, but weren't great for carrying heavy loads. You got some stress on your shoulders and different. So this Mountain Hauler design just kind of jumped out at me, and I wanted to try it. So ran that for the first part of the trip. I ran it with weight up to about 70 pounds, and then also ran it in day pack mode, ran it in a whole different variety of conditions. So some things to note that I really liked about that pack was it was highly water resistant without even the rain cover. I never pulled out the rain cover on the entire trip. Even when we got into some thunderstorms and everything, it never soaked through the pack. The water kind of beat it off and ran off the pack, which was really cool and convenient. although I do run a lot of my stuff actually on this trip, almost everything in dry bags inside the pack, so I don't really need to use rain cover. I don't even know if I would have needed to do that with it, with the weather again that we were experiencing. So the weight in that pack's on average day hunting was right around, with all my camera gear, tripods, everything else, I was around 28 to 30 pounds, and also 4 liters of water because I drank like a fish. But it was really comfortable, and I think that pack, the way the organization was and everything else, is something I'd really enjoy doing a backpack hunt with as well. So as you heard from this trip, we didn't actually do a backpack hunt. We did mostly truck camping throughout the trip. But there was a day when we were planning on hunting that I had it loaded up with all the camping gear and everything else and hiking up over the mountain, and it was a really comfortable pack. So that was kind of one of the things that I liked about that pack. So to look over at the Kifaru now, which I ran the year before and I ran for the second half of this trip. As I said, the Kifaru is a bulletproof pack. I mean, I really like that how you can customize it so much, so you can move pockets around everywhere, where that's something you can't do on the Sitka pack. So there's plus and minuses with it. With that being said, when you buy the Sitka pack, you get those pockets besides the belt pouches that and everything's included. Where when you buy a Kifaru, you got to buy these things extra, so there's additional cost. But like I said, you can customize it the way that you want, and it was also, I think, it packed down a little bit tighter and better for me for day pack mode. Even though the Reckoning pack that I was using from Kifaru is not really meant to be a day pack. It's more of an extended hunt, but you can tighten that down so much and just basically put all your necessities in the belt pouches that I ran across the back of the pack for anything you need to quickly access. So that was really cool with that pack. And the other thing that I thought was a little bit of a benefit with the Kifaru over the Sitka pack, and this is super small, but for me it was the Sitka pack, with making it subalpine. It's really cool. It keeps you concealed and everything, but it's a little bit harder to see the straps than it is running on the Kifaru, where it's the Kifaru, I have it in the OD green color, or Ranger green as they call it, with coyote brown straps on it. So they're easy to see. You can grab them. You can find the connections together very easily. What Sitka Gear did, though, that was a huge benefit, is when you have an animal down, all of their straps to strap the head on and everything else with the internal meat shelf all has orange straps and connect to orange. So when you think of, all right, you have an animal down, it's kill, you're at night, you're cutting things up with your headlamp, you just got to find orange and connect those straps together, and it works pretty simply. So both packs I was really impressed with and would recommend them to anyone. So the biggest thing is I did not pack an animal out with them. So that's one of the biggest things with an internal frame or an external frame pack, is how well they work when you're carrying a heavy load. I cannot speak under that, and I won't speak under that. So maybe there is a big difference between the two. I can't say yes or no with it, but from the way I use the pack and everything I experience, that's what information that I'll give to you guys. So any questions on that, feel free to send me an email or a message on Instagram, Facebook, anything like that, and I can maybe clarify some of that stuff a little bit more. But to move on, I was testing out a new Bino harness from Marsupial Gear. So I bought a Marsupial Gear last year and used it. Really love that pack. It's it's a chest rig, simple. It's tough Cordura, but it has just a front zipper pocket where I put like some mouth calls and a pocket knife in the front pouch there. Keep a wind checker on the side and a rangefinder in the pouch on the other side. And simple pack. magnetic closure. And this year, they came out with a new one that's actually released now. But when I got it, it was a prototype at the time. So they added some quieter material on the inside of it. So when you're sliding your binos in and out, it's not loud. It keeps it nice and quiet, which makes it great for whitetail hunting too, which I'm excited about. And that bino harness, I believe, is $75 for it, which is pretty good for the price of bino harnesses, and doesn't include a whole bunch of unnecessary pockets that make it bulky, but keeps everything protected, safe, and gives you a little bit of storage there. The other big addition to that was adding a cell phone pocket to the back of it. So I hate having things in my pockets in my pants when I'm hiking. One, your cell phone gets drenched in sweat and everything else. So I put my cell phone in that pocket that went right behind the harness up against your chest. And I was worried about being kind of hot there up against your chest, but it wasn't. And I was able to quickly access my phone when I was checking onX Maps or wanted to take a quick picture or anything along those lines. It was great. So with on my backpack strap, so on both the Sitka and the Kifaru, I ran what they call a Peak Design capture clip. And that was another thing that I've gotten a lot of questions on, is how are you carrying around your DSLR camera with you on your shoulder strap? And that's what I'm using, is a Peak Design capture clip. So I first had heard that when Aaron Snyder and Brian Call were talking about it on the Gritty Bowman podcast. And I bought that a couple years ago and have really liked it. It's taken a while to figure out how to get it set up on my strap so that I can still shoot my bow with it, but I've got to the point where I feel comfortable drawing my bow even with my camera on there. So that's a really, big addition for me there. With inside the Bino pack there, so inside the Marsupial gear, I'm running my Maven B.2s, 9x45s. And if you've looked at my social media, as far as like on the Instagram page, on my personal page, I was running Instagram stories throughout the hunt. Whenever I'd get service, I'd upload a bunch of videos, and I was showing the low light usage with my Mavens. Sitting on a tripod, as you look out in the bare light, all you could see, it was basically dark. But when you look through the Mavens, you could still see the elk that were going across the top of the ridge, and that was just super impressive. I've really liked Maven's product, and also the company and the guys behind it are extremely great guys. It's a really small company, but they stand behind their product. They're extremely proud of what they make, and the low light clarity, the edge clarity with ED glass that's in there is unreal. And as with a lot of other high-end binoculars and optic companies, they're doing the no-fault lifetime warranty on them. Even you do something to them, send them back, get them fixed, no questions asked. These guys are great and will take care of you. So those Mavens were something that I would definitely recommend. And since they are a direct-to-consumer company, they can sell the product, higher-end product, at a lower price point. So I'm a huge fan of those Mavens. And the B2s and the 9x45. And the reason why that's kind of like a weird number there. Normally you see 10x42s, some of those. So the 9x45, the reason for it is the design of the binos with a lower magnification allows more light to come through. So in those low light situations, you can last that extra 5 minutes and get a little bit wider field of view. Are you going to be able to sit there at half a mile and glass up, a buck and be like, all right, he's got, or a buck or a bull, and say he's got a sticker coming off his left too? No, probably not. But you're going to be able to tell that that's a shooter, and you're able to see that there's a deer there. Where something with more magnification, you may not be able to see it at that point. And again, everyone has their preference. But for me, for an all-around elk hunting Bino, that 9x45 was where it's at. So, definitely check out Maven's products if you haven't heard of them. They're extremely good there. So, moving on a little bit, I want to get into water filtration. So, water filtration, there's 3 different things that I used on this trip for water filtration. I used a Steripen, which uses a UV light to kill any of the bacteria. And I used Aquamira drops, which is the part A, part B that you drip in the water and wait 30 minutes until it's good to drink. And then I also used the Platypus gravity-fed filter system that I've used in the past. To kind of describe what the difference is, like I said, the Steripen is literally like a pen that you hold in your hand that it uses a UV light. You just kind of swirl it into water, and it'll I think it turns blue, or it's blue when you're swirling in there, and once it's all the bacteria is out of there, it just shuts off. And that's how you know it doesn't take very long, a minute at most, to do that for like a 1 liter Nalgene bottle. But the version that we had was good for a Nalgene bottle and nothing more. So that's good for some quick drinks there. But also there was the Aquamira drops, which are just droplets that you put in, again, part A, part B. So many drops per how many liters you're doing it with there, and just wait 30 minutes. That works extremely well also. But the one downfall to both the Steripen and the Aquamira drops is if you're in a place where it's kind of muddy, or you have floaties in there, and if that bothers you, then those aren't the tools for you, because you're going to get stuff floating around in there from the water. If you have a perfect clear stream coming out, then it works, I think, ideal. And the last system that I had is a Platypus gravity fed. I kind of swore that I'd never use one of these again after having so many problems with them plugging up in previous years. But if you're not filtering them out of an elk wallow, and you're using it out of a creek or a stream, or even anything like that, or even like a relatively clean puddle or lake, you can just fill up the 3 liter dirty bag. I hang it up in a tree, and it's gravity fed, runs down through a filter and into a clean bag, and that filters out 100% of the particulates in the water and will make it very clear. But for me to be clear, if you're filtering out of an elk wallow, as I had done in the past, elk piss will taste like elk piss no matter what. So it might be clean, but it's still going to taste terrible. Just an FYI there. So that was kind of the breakdown between the 3 different water filtration systems that I tried out during the hunt. From that, going over to the food side of things a little bit, I had touched on, it's definitely no secret that I love Heather's Choice meals. So I use her breakfast meals for the whole trip. So my favorite is the apple pie breakfast, as well as the blueberry buckwheat, actually in the strawberry vanilla buckwheat as well. Those 3 are my favorite breakfast meals that she has. And also from a dinner menu standpoint, I talked about the smoked sockeye salmon chowder. I had those for probably half the trip because I love them so much. And also the dark chocolate chili, and a couple other ones that aren't released yet, but tried out a few of them there that are completely different than anything that she's come out with in the past. And I really hope that these come to market, because they were excellent. And I'll talk about them more once they're released. But man, were those some awesome meals to have. And then lastly, but not least, with her packaroons. Those are just like the ultimate snack to be able to have, with like 180 calories per cookie, as I'll call it, what a packaroon kind of is like a coconut cookie, I guess. And they come with 2 in a package, so you're getting, anywhere between 340 and 380 calories in those 2 little cookies, and they are absolutely amazing. So those are like my main parts of the meals. I filled them in with a bunch of other stuff, protein bars and Cliff bars, trail mix, a lot of other things, coconut oil. I use those F-Bomb coconut oil packets, 250 calories, that I put in my coffee in the morning, and also olive oil packets to put in my dinners to add some calories. I'll go through a complete kind of list of food in a different episode, because that's something I really want to dig into in more detail and don't really have time to do it on here. So we'll dig into that at a later date, but just wanted to cover it quickly. To kind of switch over to a shelter standpoint. So for the first part of the trip, I ended up truck camping for most of the trip and slept in my James Baroud USA. It's an Evasion hard shell tent. I actually did a podcast with Craig Davidson, who's the operations manager out there at James Baroud and OK 4-wheel drive in New Jersey, which I'm going to release at a different point this fall. But before I release that, I wanted to use this tent this entire fall on my trips and be able to give kind of a good review on it. And so far, so good with it. It kind of changed the game for me as far as being comfortable. It was almost kind of unfair feeling like you're sleeping in a hotel room on the top of the truck. So the memory foam mattress that's in there is really comfortable. And even on the cold nights when you had all the windows zippered up and everything, it kept it insulated in there. So the walls aren't as thin as your normal tent and really keeps your body heat in there. It keeps you nice and warm and toasty. So that was a pretty big deal to be able to have that. And also to get air circulating in there, I had a solar fan. So I was running the little solar fan in there while I was sleeping, keeping everything flowing. That was a serious game changer for getting a good sleep and some recovery. It's definitely something I'm going to use a lot. I think in the whitetail season here too is when I'm driving a place, say an hour from home or more, which there's some that in Ohio I'll be going about 5 hours, and instead of driving back to a camp or a cabin, which I will do, I'm not going to go completely rogue here, but when I have the opportunity to stay in a warm house or camp, but I will be using that, especially after a long day. You come out, it's dark after an all day sit. You just want to go to bed, eat, go to bed, wake up, and hike in early in the morning again, and get back to your tree stand. So that is something that I can't wait to use then. But on this elk hunt, that tent was an absolute game changer. And it's still on my truck right now. It's going to stay on there probably year round. Anytime, 60 seconds, I have that thing popped up, set up, climb up in there, and be sleeping in a matter of no time. In addition to that, I ran a Slumberjack Roadhouse tarp off the back of the truck. So it's a big tarp that you can pitch in a bunch of different ways and use that to kind of set up a little camp table, some chairs where we recorded these podcasts underneath that Slumberjack this whole trip. It was quick to set up, really easy to attach to the back of your truck, gave you full access to your bed, into my cap, and everything else in some place to move and cook things while staying out of the weather. So that was a big benefit. It's almost like setting up one of those canopies, but just completely becomes part of your truck and part of your camp truck setup. So I have some pictures posted up, and I have some more to get out there of that setup with the Slumberjack and the James Baroud tent there. So with that, I was talking about how I was podcasting kind of the whole time on this trip, and what I used to carry that podcast gear back in there without damaging it was, I didn't want something as heavy as like a I guess like a Plano case or SKB case or anything along those lines. I really wanted to have something that was like a soft shell kind of, but also tough enough to protect my headset, which are not cheap. So I ran a Kelty Cache Box, it's called, Cache Box, excuse me. And you can find them on Amazon or anywhere else that sells Kelty products. Kelty's a backpacking company that is also supportive of the hunting industry. So that's something to note, and why I like to support companies that are also hunter friendly. So that box was pretty cool. Fit all my stuff in there, kept it tight, and it was actually designed for cameras. So for my DSLR and lenses and everything, it'd be great for that as well. But I used it for my podcast equipment, and it worked great. Held 3 of my headsets in there, and couldn't be happier with that. So that was a kind of a bonus there. For the part of the trip where we took the horses back in, from a shelter standpoint, I used the Seek Outside Cimarron tent again, which is kind of your typical 4-man teepee tent. So it's floorless, no floor in the bottom there, just one pole going up the center. And this year I upgraded 4 of the stakes to MSRs. I wish I could remember the name off the top of my head now, but they're like these big long stakes that have kind of a twist to them. So when you drill them into the ground, they're not going to pull out in high winds. So I ran that tent, and as a question that I get, and I know that anyone else that runs these gets, is, well, doesn't the rain run underneath the tent? And as long as you don't set up in a hole, you don't get water underneath the tent. And actually, the way I pitch it, I leave gaps out to get more airflow through, just to help with condensation and everything. And I don't have any problems with water coming in, which is a really big bonus. I can walk in there with my boots on, since it's floorless, lay down on my sleeping pad, and go to bed without any worries there. And in Colorado, I'm not worried about snakes or spiders or anything there, so having that doesn't affect me. And so what I do in Pennsylvania with that Seek Outside is I have a nest that goes inside it. It's like a bug nest with a floor, like a bathtub floor in it, so that unwanted critters don't come crawling into bed with you. Moving on a little bit, I carried a Garmin inReach Mini with me. So what that is basically a satellite communication device for text messaging. You can text message any of your friends, your loved ones back home, and with those text messages, you run it through an app on your phone. So it's like texting regular on your phone, and you can choose to send out a location with that. So when they get the text message, they can click on the little link that's below it, and it takes you right to a website with the map on it, and shows exactly where you are. So you could check in, say, I'm at camp tonight, I'm at camp, or I'm glassing here all day, or whatever's going on. And that was a really cool tool to have. And I bought it when I was planning on going by myself as a safety feature, but it was great to have even when I did have people with me, to be able to give updates back home and make sure that just kind of stay in touch there. So that was a really good safety feature there, that also has an SOS button in case everything really goes bad and you need help right now. So that was a cool add-on. And then lastly, something from a hydration standpoint that I used. So every day I had between 1 and 2 packets of Mountain Ops Ignite, which is like an energy and focus type supplement that helps with, giving you a boost, also hydration and everything there, and also just helps flavor your water so you're not just drinking plain water the whole time. And with that, I'd also mix in Wilderness Athletes Hydrate and Recover packets. So I've used the Hydrate and Recover packets for a few years now too, and really like them. It seems to help when you're tired and everything else has electrolytes. and all the other kind of like vitamins and everything to help you recover at the end of the day. But also I drink it during the activity and helps, reduce soreness and everything else as you're moving. So that mixture there, I drank between 1 and 2 times a day, depending on how I was feeling, and would highly recommend it to anybody. And like I said, on the drive back, the Mountain Ops Ignite was a game changer for staying awake while driving. It doesn't give you like jitters or shakiness that like high caffeine, high sugar things do, but it just gave you kind of a clean energy source to get through the drive. So with that being said, here we're closing in on about an hour now, and that was kind of a quick rundown on all of, not all of my gear, but most of my gear, and some things I wanted to add points on there. So some of the topics I'm going to dig into a little bit deeper on some other podcasts. I'm going to be doing one with Mountain Tough Fitness to talk about the bonking effect that I experienced and why I hit that point where my immune system shut down, and what I could do differently and what you can do differently to make sure that that doesn't happen. I hope everyone really enjoyed these podcasts. These daily podcasts were something that I had an idea of. As soon as I started the idea for East Meets West, I wanted to do these daily recaps, and I really hope, like I said, that they were valuable for people and entertaining as well. I know some of the days kind of got bland, as you can imagine when you're spending that much time in the mountains and hiking your ass off all day hunting. Sometimes you don't want to sit down and record a podcast at night, but I'm glad that we did and got all that completed. So all and any feedback is much appreciated. Please let me know. Message me on social media. Send me an email. Do anything to let us know. And lastly, please go on iTunes or wherever you're listening to this at. Give the podcast a rating and review. I would really greatly appreciate that. So, and I think we'll leave it at that. Also, actually, one last thing here. So, sign up for our email list online and enter in your email and be looking for a contest coming up called the Rut Stash Challenge. I'm going to leave that at that right now until I get all the details ironed out and what it's going to look like. The Rut Stash Challenge is coming to you very soon. So check that out and let me know what you guys think. And hopefully everyone's had a great hunting season so far and are going to have good luck throughout the rest of the fall here.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Bo Martonic. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.